Welcome, everybody, to the Selling Fort Collins podcast, and welcome back Brian Kingsley, Superintendent of the Poudre School District, and our additional guest today, Kevin Havelda, who is a board member with the Poudre School District, amongst other things that we'll get into. But welcome, guys. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me back. I'm really honored to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
Right on. Well, I think our listeners got to know you a little bit, Brian, in our season 1 episode, but give them a really quick background of who you are, what you do, in case someone's listening and meeting you for the first time.
Yeah, so I'm Brian. I'm the proud superintendent of PSD. This is my 4th year, so I guess that makes me a senior this year, hoping to not graduate. It's my 27th year in public education, born and raised in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and worked as an educator up and down the East Coast from Fort Lauderdale to Raleigh, North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, and I was recruited to be the superintendent here in 2021, and this is a great place not just to work but to live. So I'm really grateful to be here.
Yeah, almost 30 years in public education.
Yeah, time flies.
That correctly?
Yeah, time flies. Next year will be year 28, which is crazy.
Oh, wow. Great. And Kevin, you're a friend. We go back a little ways here. Helped you and your wife Allison move to Fort Collins. But tell us about you, how you got involved with the board, and what you do professionally in town.
Thanks, Greg. I was going to say you have a very large role in why I'm sitting in this chair anyway. So Greg was our realtor when we were moving up to Fort Collins back in late 2021. We knew the area we wanted to be because we knew the school where we wanted to send our kid. So we are a proud Olander family. We got into the neighborhood we wanted to be in for that reason. I practice law, so I'm an attorney here in town. And shortly after I moved, I did run for the school board. I have my own background in education, not as extensive as Brian's, but I taught in some pretty rough places around the country. Had that itch to serve. The opportunity came up. I thought my wife would talk me out of it. I thought that we had too much on our plates and just with everything going on in life. And she said, well, it's our kids' district. And so if someone else makes bad decisions for our kids' district, that's on you.
Yeah, I feel like she did the opposite.
Yeah, great pep talk. She keeps my ego at a very manageable level, but she gave a great pep talk. So now I get to wear 3 hats. I'm dad, I'm attorney Havelda, and I'm director Havelda on the PSD school board for another 3 years.
You are busy.
Yeah, a little bit.
You're super busy. Well, I mean, especially lately too, right? Because, some of the things, a lot of people listening are maybe considering moving to the Fort Collins market, and a lot of them already live here. If you already live here, you probably have picked up the Coloradoan and read about the ballot measure that passed, and there's some additional funding. So, Brian, maybe you can start and kick it off and tell us about that. Tell us about the recent news.
Yeah, so let me start off by just saying thank you, voters. I think we got, 57% of the vote to accelerate about $49 million annually into our school district's coffers to really transformationally change our capital infrastructure. I think one of the things that was really compelling to the community was that our buildings, while they're modern, they're aging, and we have not been able to tend to their needs over time. And the number of dollars that we've been spending towards kind of repairs and upgrades was only about $800,000 a year. So this ballot measure includes $49 million. About $23 million of that annually will go into building renovations. We are now able to fund air conditioning units in every single one of our schools over the next several years. Super excited about that. So going from $800,000 to about $23 million in capital is just incredible. The money also allows us to invest in our employees. On average, our employees will receive about a 5% average increase in their compensation moving forward, which is really transformational for them and their families. We want to make sure that every employee not only thrives in our workplace, but they have an opportunity to live in the community in which they serve. And so continuing to stay competitive with our compensation packages remains a priority, not just for me as the superintendent, but I know our Board of Education. And then other additional dollars will go towards music instruments, career and technical education. Last time we spoke, I talked about blurring the lines between the workforce and our classroom. So now we'll have several $1 million every single year to invest in those particular spaces, which is really, really incredible too. And the money also shores up some of the challenges that we were, grappling with in our last episode regarding small neighborhood schools. Our neighborhood schools are the cornerstone of not just our community, but our school district, but they are incredibly expensive to fund as we continue to deal with lower amounts of students in our community for various reasons, but having $4 million going into shoring up our budget in our small neighborhood schools provides stability for the next several years, that those schools can not only stay open, but we're not going to have the opportunity, they're going to be able to maintain all of the high level of services and programs that they currently have, which I know is super exciting too.
Yeah, I think you all did a really good job of crafting the ask on the ballot too. I think a lot of times these ballot measures are there. People read them. They might not understand what they're voting for, what the ask is. I felt like there was a lot that went into the pregame there before it was game time and it was time to vote. Kevin, what can you tell us about those meetings, crafting that ask? I mean, does anything come to mind?
Yeah, it was a labor of love, to be clear. One of our board directors, Connor, gets a lot of credit there. He was spearheading that campaign, but we also had polling available. And as you may remember, the last ballot was very busy. It was very crowded. So initially there was a thought maybe to segregate the two asks and make two separate asks and not put all the eggs in one ballot basket, so to speak. But with the nature of everything that was on the ballot, we looked at data, we looked at polling, we listened to Brian's cabinet, who were really instrumental in crafting that message, to even triaging the ask of what the bullets were in which priority also mattered a lot. So there was a tremendous amount of thought that went into it. And then once the board had an open discussion at a meeting, which I think is also really important, because for one, I wasn't particularly wild at the very onset with just asking our community to make it slightly more expensive to kind of buy us out of some of these holes we're in. We live in a phenomenally gracious community, and one that will always invest in its schools and its teachers. And so we've had several successful ballot initiatives in the past, but this was the largest. This was historic. This was an historic ballot measure. It was the largest ask for one of the greatest needs that we could have asked for. And on the heels of the talks from last spring, our community resoundingly asked us for this exact thing. And so I think there are those that will tell you that they're worried that Fort Collins may be coming to some sort of ceiling with some of the taxes that we have. But I don't think we're there yet from what we've heard. The community responded resoundingly by passing this. I thought it was going to be in the margins, and it was not. It was passed soundly. And so now we have that measure of comfort, but also comes the impetus to do something with it. And I hope you asked Brian about some of the incredible projects we've already got planned, which I'm really excited about, as well as we now have two permanent fixtures of committees. They're going to both oversee the spending to make sure that the transparency is there for our community. And also in conjunction with that and in parallel to that, we're standing up a long-term planning committee, so that if we do continue to see declining enrollment in the next 3, 4, 5 years, we've got a plan. And it's not just going to be a reactive one, but we're going to be thinking very thoughtfully about boundary modifications every 2 years. We're going to look at some efficiency gains that we can make in smaller ways. So that's important work, and it's on the heels of passing this. But make no mistake, this was a group and team effort of which I was just a small part on the board, and I did my job cheerleading, and Brian did too, educating our community what it was going to be used for. But this was a team effort, and where the team gets all the credit.
Well, you mentioned some of these projects. Let's talk about them. I mean, what jumps out? What's something that you're excited about right now, Brian?
I'm excited that Beatty Elementary School is going to have air conditioning for the very first time in its school's history next year. O'Day will be fully air conditioned next year too. We're updating tons and tons of different elementary schools' playgrounds. Some things that, it might not matter to some people, like Trout Elementary School, one of a great school in Southeast Fort Collins, is getting its first carpet upgrade since it opened over 30, 40 years ago. And so they're super, it's these little things, right? Yeah. So being able to kind of invest in our facilities to not just, put new rooftop units and air conditioning, but it'll create greater learning conditions, working conditions. So it's a win-win scenario. And knowing these monies will be coming into our school district annually and growing with inflation, to be able to sit across our families, like a year ago that, 32 of our schools do not have air conditioning today of our 49 traditional public schools. And we had no plan. Like we had no funding solution to be able to do that. We were tackling that with some bond dollars. And now we have a plan to be able to fund all 32 of those projects over the next several years. So it's super exciting time. When you think about climate change and the working environment, so like being able to, upgrade all aspects of the capital infrastructure of our school system is a win for everybody, especially our students.
Have you seen anything too specifically in the area of recruitment, being able to recruit talent? Because you mentioned the additional funds available for paying. I mean, maybe it's retaining, maybe it's recruiting new talent. Have you seen anything specifically there? Is there anything that kind of comes to mind that's been where you've seen that benefit?
Yeah, I mean, because PSD is such a strong school district, we have a lot of longevity with our employees, especially our administrators and our teachers. We have about 92% retention rate for our teachers, but that requires, in order to keep it that high, requires us to continue to pay them at market rate, which we have unfortunately been falling behind. So this 5% average increase is certainly an accelerator to continue to keep our employees and our talent within our workforce. What I'm most excited about is our classified staff, our bus drivers, our paraprofessionals, our kitchen workers, our outdoor service people, our skilled tradespeople. The retention rate for those particular group of employees is about 74%. So a 5% average increase in their salary. Plus, we're in the process of just starting negotiations again. So I'm super hopeful that we could kickstart that compensation conversation even a little bit further by the close of this school year. I think it's transformational for a lot of families' lives. And we figured out a way in our school system to provide a one-time lump sum payment in the amount of a 5% to their base actually this January. So going into the holiday season, knowing all of our employees are going to benefit from that real quick in the next fiscal year is just going to be transformational for a lot of their families. I've gotten a lot of thank yous for that.
I love that. I mean, the cost of living here in Fort Collins it has been rising. So I mean, it's timely. Taking care of your people. And you mentioned, Kevin, too, the plans for what if enrollment continues to decrease. There's oversight committees. Tell us more about that. Like what happens conceptually if enrollment starts to decrease a little bit? Do we know yet? Or there's at least committees that will look at that and kind of have plans in place. Are there plans in place now? Or explain more about that.
So before I jump in, I do want to echo one thing that Brian said too, because I think it's important, is that when we're investing in our people and our staff, they comprise roughly 80 to high 80% of our entire expenditure of our entire budget. So we badly need this for infrastructure needs, as Brian alluded to. And there is a sort of a $1 billion looming number as far as all the infrastructure needs that we have to attend to. And with previously just having an $800,000 in the coffer was not going to get it done. Right. I mean, that's one Boilermaker at one school if it goes out. Right. So there was no contingency. So again, thank you to the voters for entrusting us with this massive amount of money that's going to help. Now, to answer your question, what happens? What we went through as a community is not isolated to us. I know it may have felt that way, but we're looking at national birth rate declines all over the board. And there's a myriad of factors as to why that's the case. Life is getting more expensive in most of our communities. It just is. Interest rates are high. Taxes are getting higher. It's just getting harder to live and to have kids to go through those programs. So what we felt it's not unique to us, I think, is the first important point. I'm also a big believer, I think I've shared this with you in my daily Stoic readings. So Stoicism at its core says we can't control the things that happen to us. What we can control is our responses to those things. So I think what we went through this last spring was we went through an accelerated approach of what do we do if our school enrollments dip below a certain percentage. And this isn't just abstract. I mean, without having those kids occupy those buildings, we don't get the dollars that follow from them, from Denver, right? Based on our school-based budgeting system, right? So fewer kids mean fewer dollars. We still have that huge pool of people that still have to educate our kids, regardless of how many kids are there. So what we were talking about, what schools are talking about now, are some major cuts in salaries, and reorgs and reductions in forces and school closures and school consolidations. being the perennial optimist that I am, I think we have an opportunity to shift some of those enrollment trends internally. And so how that works in conjunction with 4A, as Brian mentioned, is that there is a certain portion of what we just passed that's going to be helping to stabilize some of those neighborhood schools. And we're not just going to let them off on their own and just say, oh, good luck. So we're going to be doing a lot of work, especially in communications, going around to these neighborhood schools, trying to drive up their enrollment. And so your listeners, your audience thinking about Fort Collins, one of the best things that I can say to someone who's recently gone through this, it doesn't matter where you live in PSD, there is an excellent school in your neighborhood, which is it's an amazing thing. And I've taught in so many other systems in New Orleans and New York where that is simply not the case. And people are priced out of certain places and priced in, and there is a rush to get in a certain zip code because the schools are more attracted there. Here, you've got a combination of factors. One, we just have such an excellent teaching base, and our schools are excellent from start to finish. So you really can't go wrong. So you should focus on where you want to live in town, because knowing that there's going to be a school in your neighborhood that could be excellent. And even if there's not to your liking, or if there's something that you need for your student that's not offered, you can avail yourself of school choice. And we have a lot of friends in our neighborhood that want something slightly different for their education. And so they're willing to drive their kid, to get to a different school to avail themselves of that. So all that is kind of working in flux. Now back to these standing committees. These long-term committees are being asked to wrestle with some hard data, to look through what are these enrollment trends going to give us in years 1, 2, 3. Because I think that the social compact that we made with our voters was that you agree to put this on the ballot. If it passes, we stave off that consolidation closure talk for a moratorium of 3 to 5 years. Okay. I think we've been very clear, and we're going to continue to be clear, that just because it passed, the work is still not done. Meaning that we have a 3-year opportunity, in my view, to get enrollment back up in all the places where we can. And if we can't, and we have schools that dip below 50% utilization or dip below the 50% population, such that we cannot guarantee the level of services that we require at PSD, then we have to start thinking about what that looks like. Is that a consolidation? Is it a movement? What is it? But we've essentially bought ourselves a couple of years to have these discussions, so they're not just a snap knee-jerk reaction. They're very thoughtful. These communities are being comprised of not only PSD staff, but also members of the community, which is really important, so that we've got sort of that legitimacy and that buy-in from our community members that are going to be navigating these conversations with us. And they're going to be giving us recommendations in 3 to 5 years as to what they think we should be doing. So it's a very much both organic and collaborative with our community.
Well, you're putting together these metrics that are agreed upon by everybody. And you're saying that if there is another future conversation about closing schools in our area. And if you are curious about that, listeners, go back and listen to the last episode with Brian Kingsley. That's when we were kind of just getting through that. There was the talk, and that was the big thing in the news about potentially closing some schools because of decreased enrollment. I think it's fascinating that we've gone through this process now, and there are these agreed upon metrics where, hey, we'll just see how it plays out. And now everyone's on the same page going forward. You mentioned school of choice in there a little bit too, and that's something I get a ton of questions on. Brian, you want to touch on that? Maybe you explained it last episode, but really maybe a short explanation of what is school of choice. And a question I'm getting a lot lately is, will that ever change? Could that ever change? Or is school of choice always going to be here?
Yeah, so choice is embedded into Colorado state law, which really allows families, regardless of where you live, you can pretty much send your child to any school that you want as long as you can figure out how to resource their transportation to get there. So we have a plethora of different, really strong academic options. I think, as you were talking, Kevin, I always imagine if we took PSD and put a map of our district on a dartboard, you can throw that dart and be certain that wherever that dart lands, you're going to find an incredible school within proximity of that dart. I mean, that's how blessed and lucky we are. We have a gem of a district, and our families value the various options that they have academically for their children. And they want to be a part of a choice process. Actually, of our 49 traditional public schools, 1 out of every 3 families is choosing to send their child to a different PSD school than the one that's closest to their their home. And I don't believe that's because they want to, have an exodus from their neighborhood. It's just that there's a strong academic program like an IB program or a core knowledge program or a dual language program that really families want and, really demand. And I think it's really, really great that we offer all of those choices. So School of Choice works like that, where, if you are a family and you have a bounded neighborhood school for elementary, middle, and high that you are guaranteed placement in. But if there are schools that have capacity, which means some empty seats, and you have the opportunity and the means to get your child there, you can fully participate in that. We do have choice schools too. So it's not just choicing into different neighborhood schools or programmatic options that they're available. We have a couple choice schools like Kennard Middle School is a choice school that's open to the entire district. We have Polaris Expeditionary Learning School. Lesher is another school that has been a very popular middle school and for its IB program.
What's an IB program?
It's an international baccalaureate program. It is a program that is designed to help children be more global type citizens. So there's not only a lot of academic rigor, but there's a lot of service oriented, community driven work. Our IB program at the high school level is at Poudre High School. And I will tell you the merit that comes with that diploma. It's almost like you're graduating, not just with a high school diploma, but it's almost like compared to an associate's degree at the same level. So the level of rigor that's there is just super, super strong. And those students end up going to just about any collegiate program in the United States that they want. So, and we have that in our backyard, and that's great. A vision and a future that I hope that this district has is trying to figure out how to level the playing field for access to these various options. Because right now, as I shared, any family who has the means to get a child there can certainly participate in choice. But if you are dependent upon public transportation or need a bus, those are things that from a financial standpoint, our district hasn't been able to execute on, but I know is very much a part of our future focused conversation around how to level the playing field and ensure, regardless of zip code, wherever you are in the PSD community, we're going to try to figure out a way to transport you to these various options. So we haven't been able to do that. We're trying to be really creative with our budget. 4A certainly helps in that space because a part of our capital infrastructure beyond our buildings is our fleet. If you want to drive a flashy company car, come and be a bus driver for PSD. We're about to invest in buying about 22 brand new buses in the next several months, which I think is going to be amazing too, to actually accelerate those various types of transportation options for our families.
Oh, that's great. I think about my first grader, and I want to talk about your little guy too, Kevin, but the things that they're involved in. I mean, my son is in Spanish club. He's in chess club. He's in robotics. And this is, on top of school, right? He also goes to school, and he's in basketball and other stuff too, but that's incredible. I mean, do you guys remember, did you guys ever have these options when you were growing up? I mean, I didn't.
No. Not like this.
It's a whole different world now. And he's, what's robotics? Well, it's like Legos, except, that you can kind of control and move. And he tells me the things that they do. And I'm like, I cannot believe it. Like, that sounds like, he's 7 years old and he's doing something that I would, imagine is more for 17-year-olds of previous generations. They're there right now. And I think that's a big reason that a lot of these people will opt for school of choice. It's not that the school in their area, in their neighborhood isn't great. They're just all different and they all offer different things. Like I suppose if Nolan wants to be a Major League Baseball player, I got to figure out a way to get him into Rocky because like Rocky's churning out the Major League Baseball pitchers. And soccer, probably Fossil Ridge High School. We got to get him down to Southeast Fort Collins, following the shoes of Sophia Smith at Fossil Ridge High. But it's probably the same in different areas, whether whatever you want to do in your life, if it's business, if it's engineering, if there's these different programs at different schools, and the options are really, incredible. And if someone wants to learn about these options, if somebody wants to kind of just say, all right, well, maybe they have a first grader like I do, or maybe their son or daughter's a little bit older. What's a good way to explore these and learn more about the schools and the options and the clubs?
That's been the challenge, right? Is because with this plethora of options, for someone coming in this community, it can be overwhelming. There's so many schools and so many programs and so many different things to consider. So one step back on school of choice, our school choice was we knew the school we wanted to be in, at least for our son, Bo. And so my wife was fairly aggressive about our strategy, Greg, as you may recall, in limiting our look into that area of town where we'd be in that feeder system. So there's also something to say is school choice is also means those that are very intentional with where they choose to live because of the neighborhood school. So that's almost equally as important to those that, like Olander, for instance, is one of the highest choiced in schools in our district. And I think that if you pull back some of that data, the reason that's the case is that it's a really robust ILS program, which is it's for students with special needs. They are included in classroom activities, and it is an incredible place where there's children that run the gamut of very severe physical special needs, and then those with cognitive special needs as well. But they're treated the exact same. They're not pulled out and put in a separate room. It's a push in kind of model, and then it just kind of normalizes it. But to your point too about kind of navigating these choices, our new communications director, we actually had a meeting on Friday, and I'm really excited about this. He's starting a new initiative, which I'm going to plug here. It's called Choose PSD. And so what he's going to do is go to our website, which we're going to kind of revamp a bit, and plug in a couple things like where am I looking at? What's the address of a house that I'm considering? And not only will it give you the neighborhood schools, but it'll give you a quick one sheet of like what it is, what the curriculum that's there, what things are being said about it, et cetera. And so that's going to be sort of a primary source of where you can get a lot of this information, which it shouldn't be overwhelming, right? I mean, you should feel empowered with the school you're choosing to send your kid to, et cetera. So we're going to do better on that. But other than that too, I mean, if you talk to the parents who are already here, it's not lost to me, especially going through our consolidation talks last year, just how truly invested all these parents are. And when we say these local school communities, they truly are their own communities. And I mean, they've got robust PTO groups. They've got various leaders and the students. And so they are very invested in their individual school communities. And so they'll be happy to tell you about their schools. And so that's been helpful. There's a couple of Facebook groups that you can navigate as well if you're on social media. But it's a lot of it's word of mouth and trying to polish some of our own marketing to kind of give you the smorgasbord of all these wonderful offerings that we have.
Just go to a coffee shop or a brewery in town and ask about school, and people will tell you for an hour about how
I was thinking
proud
that
they are.
same thing.
Yeah.
I bet if you're in town, you just go to New Bells or
That's right.
If you just ask a coffee shop, if you just ask people, I would. This is probably one of the, we talked a little bit last time, Brian, about how nice people are here. I was talking about how, you spend some time in Denver or somewhere else. And, the first half of the day I'm down there, I'm looking people in the eyes saying hi, and they're kind of freaking them out because they don't operate the same way. Nothing wrong with these places, that people are just a little bit maybe friendlier here than at least a lot of places. I think people would share that information.
1,000%.
Like they would share that if you're at a coffee shop. But I mean, I like the idea of a Facebook, getting on Facebook. There are different groups, leaning in a little bit, probably, Google search, probably, who are some other parents you might know or have some connection to in the area. It sounds like those are the best ways to get the information.
Yeah. pstschools.org is our website. I mean, it has a plethora of options. We're doing some revamping there to really highlight and illuminate with a little greater depth the various programs that we're offering. So I think that's a place to start. I also think we have incredible principals who are super skilled at telling their school story. And so there is, our buildings are open to the public, not just to the people that we serve. So if there's a family out there that's curious, just go visit a school and sit down and talk to a principal. They are well seasoned in telling their school story and helping families make decisions that are in the best interest of their family in our local schools. They're a little competitive too, but that's part of the job of trying to figure out how to sell our brand and make sure that people choose PSD. But we're really trying to figure out how to maximize those opportunities for our families because, we just found out recently we have 458 fewer students this year than we did a year ago. So the challenges that we were wrestling with a year ago, they're not solved. We have bought us some time, as Kevin shared appropriately. But if you put 458 children into one building today, that would be the 5th largest elementary school in PSD. So that's significant. So we want to make sure that if you are a family that is choosing to live and work here, we want to make sure that you're sending your child to a traditional public school. But we know that birth rates are declining and housing affordability continues to be a challenge. But the families that are here, we want to make sure that we're able to partner with them through our school district.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, do you two ever see school of choice going away, or is that far in the future, or is school of choice kind of a thing that we can always just, be proud of here and expect to remain in the future?
I don't have a crystal ball any more so than Brian does. I think what you're seeing also on the ballot, which was rejected by our voters across Colorado, was Amendment 80. And Amendment 80 was a constitutional amendment that was going to enshrine school choice as a part of the Colorado Constitution. Now, the reason that is significant is that once something is a constitutional amendment, makes it much harder to get rid of or to change, right? Was concerning about Amendment 80 from my own vantage was that it didn't exclude private, non-secular institutions of learning to be inclusive in that school choice. So what that means then for taxpayers is that I can't control that my taxes are not going to be used to be sent to a parochial school, and that means that my student could then avail themselves of school choice through the law, going to a religious school, right? So I think that's the bright line that Coloradans drew. But as far as it's going away, I think we're still in an experimental stage, in my own view. Like I said, I've been in a couple of different school districts that all have different contours of school choice and what that means. But here, I've been very impressed with how educated and involved parents are. And for that reason, I mean, my sister, I'll pick on her a bit. My oldest niece both were in the Rocky feeder system, right? But my older niece wanted a smaller school setting. And so they go to Polaris, which is expeditionary learning, which is a perfect fit for that student. But their sister now goes to Rocky. And so having a parent that knows their kid really well and then can understand what the best environments are, I think that's an incredible thing to offer to any parent, because parents are the experts of their kids, right? So, but the tension that Brian mentioned, the school choice isn't without consequence, though. And I think it's important to name some of those consequences. And one, that if there is it requires a level of resource to access the system in order to navigate it. Okay, so I'm thinking predominantly of families that aren't English as their predominant language. They'll go to a neighborhood school. There may be a better fit for their student elsewhere, but navigating that and then securing transportation for their student to go to a Kennard, to go to a Trout, may not be an option. And so I think that is an inequitable reality that I'd like to resolve. And Brian and I have been talking about this since last year about how can we do that? How can we allow for transportation, some of these families that would otherwise want to go to a different school, that just are priced out of it. So that's one thing. The other thing too, which is of note, is that like Colorado, so many other states have charter schools. So we have several charter schools in our footprint that are district authorized charter schools. So that's different from just being a state authorized charter school, meaning that they share in some of our budget. So their per pupil headcount entitles them to a sliver of our total gross operating budget, which in the last year was about $33 million of about a $450 million budget. So that's $33 million going directly to charter schools in our footprint that aren't going to just the traditional PSD schools. So there's I don't want to use the word winners and losers, but there are consequences to expanding a school choice. So if charter schools were to expand, that would decrease our enrollment in other places too. And so there's some of those tensions that we see on the board and that we see from our community that voice these concerns to us. And how do we deal with that? And I don't have the answer, but I do know that the legislators are working hard at maybe thinking more critically through some of the contours of what school choice means. Are there enrollment periods where we could have cutoffs? Are there ways to make a little bit more sense so it's a little bit more fair to the traditional public school that's in the neighborhood that is seeing declining enrollment just from that reason alone?
Right.
So, I threw a lot at you. I know there's a lot of big topics.
That's good. I mean, I have a few follow-up questions there. First, let's talk about charter schools. Like, what are they? How do they differ? What's the difference between district? Let's dive into that. I want to kind of hear that from you, Brian. Like, let's talk about charter schools and what they are, just for starters.
Yeah, charter schools they're public schools funded by public taxpayer dollars. They were meant by law to provide alternative choices to families that may want through competition, a different type of academic program than what's currently offered to them. In PSD, we have 5 district-sponsored charter schools, and there are other state-sponsored charter schools that live and work and exist within our community too, which provide other options beyond our 49 traditional public schools for families to attend. That does not include private schools. That does not include parochial schools. So there are various options beyond charter schools and our traditional public schools too. They currently represent about 9% of our total district enrollment. So when we talk about the recent ballot measure that passed, our 5 district-sponsored charter schools are entitled to about a 10% pass-through. So about $4.6 million of that $49 million will be passed through our budget and go to those 5 district-sponsored charter schools. So they're just more options, which is not a bad thing. But when you think about the current climate, right? So you have housing prices in some instances going up, you have declining birth rates, and you have more options than probably you need. It creates a pretty significant challenge for school systems to continue to offer the various programs that PSD does. Dealing with one of those challenges is not overly complex, but dealing with all of them in the aggregate makes it really, really challenging, which I think is great that we've bought ourselves some time, but continuing to reconcile with the loss of student enrollment for a myriad of reasons is going to continue to be a challenge that we have to work through together. And I think one of the things that we all learned over the course of the past year of having these very difficult conversations with our families is they want to know, our schools are intertwined not only into our neighborhoods, but into our parks and recreation. And so they're places of, how do I say this? They're a place of convening, not just during the school day, but on weekends where people are walking their dogs and using our playgrounds. And we've opened up our tracks and our tennis courts. So they're places where people congregate in our community. So I think in the event, in the future, 5 years out or hopefully longer, if we have to have difficult conversations around how to repurpose some of our buildings, I think we have to, what's different about PSD is we have to be able to tell the community what the value add in terms of what's coming into those specific facilities. I've been having some really exciting conversations with the city and the Chamber of Commerce around how to reimagine, maybe making our schools in the future marketplaces where there's coffee shops and there's dining areas and restaurants and things where people can continue to use the asset in which it was designed to do, which bring people and young people together, but really reimagine how we use those facilities in the future. I just had a chance to go back home in Pennsylvania to visit my parents for Thanksgiving, and my parents actually live in a repurposed elementary school that's now a retirement community for people 55 and older. And so to be able, it's great. Yeah. So to be able, it's been life-changing for them. Like their apartment is really exists of 2 classrooms together, and they've reimagined how they flow. But all of the things that school was once using, like its gymnasium as a place for convening for, my mom and all of her friends, and they're playing shuffleboard and cards and, all these different things. So it's been a really neat thing to see how different communities are thinking about how to use their schools in different places. Because as Kevin alluded to, we're not alone in this. But I think what does make us unique in this space is how engaged our families are in our respective schools and our school district community, and how much of us say that they want and expect to have in terms of what this means for their community moving forward. And I have a great deal of respect and admiration for that. So it's an interesting time for sure.
Can I jump in? One thing too. So again, Greg, my vantage, I taught in traditional public schools and in charter schools in different places though, not in PSD. So my first post was teaching in post-Katrina New Orleans, which was, they called it the Great Experiment. I know I alluded to that earlier, but at one point, 100% of their public schools were charter schools. And so the other interesting thing about a charter school is that it is by definition more autonomous in how it's governed. So it has its own board of directors. It has its own.
So it's separate from you guys, right? It's separate from you guys, but it's getting some of your funding?
So it's a part. So because the district authorized charter schools, they will submit their applications to us as the PSD Board of Education. We have to approve it on a 5-year term. But for their day-to-day governance, they have their own board of directors. So they answer to their own board of directors and their own head of schools. And that's most of the case. Most of the charter school footprint has that. So
they're not PSD employees. I'm really glad that you brought that up.
Which is so that's a good distinction, right? So it does separate some of the purview that PSD does have over these schools while allowing them that autonomy that they need to function in their own way. So it's interesting too, because when I moved to Colorado, charter school is a very specific problem, or excuse me, a very specific solution to a very specific problem from my view. A lot of these times where I taught in New York, I'll use Uncommon Schools is a phenomenal charter school network it sprung up in areas of high concentrations of poverty where their traditional public schools weren't getting it done and there was no plan in place that could address these situations. And what we're talking about are kids that were in mass dropping out by fifth grade because they were 3 to 4 years behind grade level on average. And so those kids that they drop out in fifth grade are going to gangs, are going to violence, are going to the streets. And so there was an urgency surrounding the work that we did each and every day in fifth grade. And so within 1 year, we had increased on average reading levels by 3 years on average within 1 year, which is incredible. I mean, it helps you cook the right medicine, but the work we were doing, it was called a 90-90-90 school. So it was 90% free and reduced lunch, 90% students of color, and they had a 90% graduation rate out of high school. So it was changing the trajectory of these kids' lives, these students and families' lives that didn't have another option. So it's interesting coming to Colorado, charter schools are different. I mean, I don't think we've got a charter school that would meet that definition in PSD. So it's a completely different understanding of what school choice is to those particular parents. But that's an interesting conversation to have too.
I'm trying to think of what's an example of a charter school in town and why would someone send their kids there? I'm just curious. Like what one comes to mind for you? Like what's a popular one?
So we like Brian said, there's a couple. Liberty Common is one so there's an Aristotle campus that's catty corner to Olander, right? So it's an interesting, and I think situationally they got that building through some kind of deal because it was just there. But I don't want to speak for families that send their kids there. I've talked to my friends in my neighborhood that send their kids there, and a lot of it has to do with the level of research you're going to perform as a parent as far as what you want out of your education, right? So if someone you trust tells you Liberty's got great academics, because they do. Liberty has an excellent academic performance as a school. And so if that is your myopic focus and I want my kid to have the most rigorous, and I believe that.
It's a tough homework school, right? It's the kind of school like your kids are like, they've got a lot of homework. It's pretty intense.
And so it is that. But what I'd push back though too is that Olander and some of our other schools that are in the neighborhood, they're a both and school. So it's not just the academic rigor that I expect for my kid to get. But I'll give you an anecdote that we heard in the spring. Because of its higher concentration of students with special needs, there was one afternoon where I think a third grader was walking down the hallway in a fairly severely physically disabled child. And all of a sudden at that exact time, there were two classes that were lining up to change classes to go to specials. And if there was an opportunity for kids to bully another kid, this was it. And instead, the kids all, without being asked, without being prompted, these Olanders, these Ospreys started cheering on the kid. I mean, I get chills just thinking about the story and cheering on this kid and saying, you can do it, you can do it. And so that is built into their DNA. And so as a parent that's choosing a PSD school, again, we'll talk about some of our district priorities, but I like knowing that I'm sending my kid to a school that doesn't only just tackle the academic rigor and the academic, but it also teaches the whole child. And I want my kid to be prepared to enter into a workforce and enter into the world as a good human being. And that's our bread and butter too, as PSD. And so I don't know if that answered your question about charter, but I do think that, parents will look to the reputation of whatever school they hear from their friends. And so part of my push this year, the next couple of years I'm on the board, is to really push this notion, especially to parents considering our schools, choose PSD both for the academic rigor, but because we're also going to take care of your kid. It's your most precious commodity that you're going to entrust to our care. And we are going to give you the result, not only a kid that's well prepared academically, but one that you're going to be proud of to have leave our hallways and be a good member of our society.
I think what makes our district unique at the traditional public school aspect of our district is it's the only district I've ever seen where we actually measure human connection. So you talked earlier about how your child is participating in chess club and robotics club. That's by design. That's not accident in PSD, right? Every single year we measure how students feel in terms of whether they're connected to their peers, do they feel connected to their teachers, and do they feel connected to their personal interests and passions. And I think that is really, really incredible because when we realize that there are students on the margins or they're outliers that are disconnected, those are ways for us to bring them in and say, hey, now, what are your interests? Let's design a club and a program specific to you, because I'm sure if it's something that you want, other people might want it too. And so a lot of those different types of programs that go above and beyond our core classes that our teachers and our paraprofessionals are mentoring and coaching, those things are really, really important to make sure people feel plugged in and have various options, both through their academic career and journey here in PSD, but post-graduation, we want to make sure we're exposing children to as many different pathways and options as possible, from starting at kindergarten and pre-K, to be honest with you. So I think that's what makes us pretty unique.
That makes me think of our first conversation. I went back and listened to it just last night and then a little bit this morning. And it was hitting me again that you're so dialed into, and then I think through you and Kevin and the board and just the other leadership, dialed into helping kids find their unique ability, their genius zone, whatever you want to call it. And that's what gets me really excited about having my kids go through, is we are going to find out what lights them up.
That's right.
You talked a lot
Capture
about
their
that.
heart.
Yeah, let's capture their heart. Let's find out what lights them up. And then the other thing I'm getting more of this conversation too is I think you're really dialing into helping them build their emotional intelligence. Their EQ, I think, is the way people are referring to it now. And I think when we're talking about life and business and all the things we've been through, and we're maybe all roughly the same age. It's fascinating to think that we would probably all agree that our emotional intelligence is at least as important as anything else. And putting the onus on that, putting the focus on that, just intentionally, is special. So, let's talk about some of the district initiatives, going forward. Like, let's talk about what lights you up. Like, what's getting you really excited for what's coming up here? Has anything else come to mind for either of you?
So there's 3 district priorities, and this is another thing that really sold me when I was contemplating running, and I thought, do I want to be a part of a school system, as an elected, that, what are they all about? And so beyond a mission statement, there are 3 district priorities. One is literacy, and I'll have Brian sort of talk about that anchor. The next is mental health and belonging, mental wellness and belonging, which we spoke to a bit. So that's really crucial there. And then third, which I'm really fired up about too, is graduating with options. We are no longer in a society where I can, in good conscience, tell every single student, you should go to college. You should go to a 4-year college and incur $750,000 worth of debt with no way out. Now, some, they'll go that route, the traditional route, and that's great. I'm saving for my kids for that possibility. But I think we need to be honest in meeting students where they are, and that preparing them for what comes after graduation may not be a 4-year college, or at least not immediately. And so the work that we're doing there, and this is what gets really excited, is I think traditionally growing up, we had heard of STEM programs or these programs as sort of you're not the smart kids, right? Or that was sort of what you would have heard. You're not an academic honors kid, so therefore you're doing this because. And that's just not the case anymore. I mean, you've got kids that may not have the financial means to put themselves directly into med school, right? Or go to college and med school. What they'll do is they'll get an EMT certification. They'll make $90 to $100 an hour at graduation, and they can finance their way through college if they so choose, and then go to med school as well. Or they'll have a nursing background. So they're plugged into our community immediately. So they have work available, and they have skills that can translate into whatever job setting they may want. And talking about school choice, we have so many school choices that fit that particular bill. That are going to help increase those skill sets for all of our kids. And also just to demystify it and not to make it a dirty word anymore, but to empower our kids to say, there's a financial reality for you, and we can get you plugged in right away. And you're using actual tangible skills in your day-to-day, and talk about the engagement. Those kids, the engagement now, there is a purpose for their education beyond just the traditional, I have to go to a 4-year institution. And so we're putting money into that. So is the Bohemian Foundation. Thank you again for their generous donation into that program. Larimer County as well. Thank you. So there is an investment from our community into our kids, into whatever path you want to do. But we're going to make the guarantees that you're going to be a literate member of our society in so many different facets. You're going to feel like you belong as a part of this community, because it's a larger community and you are a part of it. And also, we want to give you options upon graduation so that you can make a future of your own choosing and feel well equipped to navigate that. So that's what gets me really fired up. And those are the big, hairy goals that the board wrestles with. And so we're coming up with policies and we're making decisions that these guys then have to execute in furtherance of those goals. So we sort of had the lofty, ambitious part of the policy governance, and then Brian and his expert crew get to quarterback it and get to do it. So
It's fun. I mean, it's, to me, my grand experiment as an educator is, how do you not only graduate really smart people, but make sure they're also really good humans, right? That are going to contribute to their community and to society. And I think in order for those things to happen, there's some basic conditions. They need to be highly literate, right? And it's not just being able to read and being able to write. It's being able to work on a team and solve nuanced, complex problems. It's being financially literate, media literate. You think of how much information that we're consuming with our phones each and every day, and through technology. We need to be able to sort through what's real and what's not. There's so much misinformation and disinformation. So literacy being a priority is more than just the ability to read, but really making sure that every single human being that walks through our front doors feels a deep sense of belonging, and they're affirmed. All of their identities, our families are sending their very best to us every day. That's the best and most important social compact that I can think of, is when a family is trusting you with their young children and young adults to make them better people in partnership with them. And our parents partner with us in really, really amazing ways. And if you can do those two things well, students not only graduate from this school district, but they can sit and talk to us about the various options that they have. And the options that Kevin's articulating are really starting to blur the lines between the workforce and our classrooms. It's $2.5 million of investment that's happening at Poudre High School right now to reimagine an advanced manufacturing pathway with the latest, greatest technology. And that's all being sponsored by Woodward Governor. And Woodward's going to be using our facilities for their own employees to upskill and reskill. And so it's a true partnership. And I think these are the things that are happening that are, garnering our system results. Mm-hmm. We just found out that last year's graduation rate, which is about 87.5%, is the highest graduation rate in PSD's last 20 years. Super awesome. Our literacy rates went up last year in our elementary school by over 22%. So you think about students who are coming into our schools, they're struggling, they're below grade level. We actually accelerated 22% of those students to being on or above grade level by the end of the year last year. That's transformational type numbers. And we learned, and you moved here in 2021, I did too. Our students were really struggling during COVID. I mean, heck, all human beings were struggling during COVID, and, having schools go to remote learning and students being isolated from their peers, from their personal interests, really took a toll on their mental health and their well-being. And so really prioritizing and putting, we've gotten about $15 million of federal and state grants to infuse more mental health specialists, more school counselors, more social workers. And the data that we're seeing where students are actually feeling a deeper sense of belonging has been, I think, life-saving type statistics. The number of high school students in PSD right now that are reporting persistent sadness or hopelessness is down by over 40% in 2 years as a result of these investments and measuring connection and making sure they're plugged in, making sure that they have trusted adults. The number of students in our district today that are reporting ideation about suicide is down by over 40% in the past 2 years. So those things, to me, when people feel healthy and whole and affirmed, that is then and only then when they can learn at high levels. And if you put us in a pathway for 13 years with your young people, not only are they going to graduate with a diploma that has high integrity, but they're going to have various options. And a lot of our students are graduating with college credits, industry certifications. I met a young person from Fossil Ridge High School last year. She actually had an associate's degree before I ever even offered her a high school diploma because she was participating in these various pathways. It's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. So, I mean, that's all available in our community, and it's really a gem of an opportunity for families to think about.
And to harp on one thing, sorry.
Yeah, no, please.
I mean, and a lot of the amazing things that Brian just said, that reduction in suicidal ideation. I mean, when we're talking about educating the whole child, it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If your belly isn't full, you can't learn. If you don't feel any kind of connection or love in whatever you're going through as a young adult, learning is a distant second, right? And so we are in the business of educating our kids, but I think zooming out and looking at the role of our schools that they play to our kids, especially those that are food insecure. We have a grappling number of students who don't have permanent housing right now. We take care of all of them. And we have several Title I schools in our district that have closets that are filled with sleeping bags and blankets and things like that, so that families that are housed insecure have some basic measure of need that's met on a weekend. bridging them to Monday. We have to be thoughtful about all that. And so those numbers that Brian said it's not only proof that the medicine that is working, that the cooking is really working, but those are real lives. Those are kids whose lives are better by going to school every day in our district, and having seen some of those schools and been in some really rough schools where kids come to school to get fed. They come to school to feel an iota of love every day. I mean, we're cooking with the right medicine here at PSC. There's no other way to say it.
Well, that's huge. And I also think that just connecting them to their unique ability, what lights them up, and giving them a compelling future. You talked about Woodward Governor getting involved. And I mean, for those of you who haven't heard of Woodward Governor, I mean, Google them and you'll probably learn more than you can learn from me. But, probably some of the highest paid engineers in the world. They're an international company. They happen to have a corporate headquarters here in Fort Collins, beautiful corporate campus. And the fact that they're getting involved with PSD is incredible. I mean, and it makes me wonder about additional opportunities. If you look at what's happening with the tech sector here with Broadcom, AMD in the chip space, HP, Intel, Microsoft is here now. If you look at the healthcare sector with the University of Colorado healthcare system and all the things happening there, I mean, what additional possibilities might there be that we're, starting with Woodward and might continue with other companies? I mean, it's really compelling. And it makes me also just, wonder about a topic I also wanted to bring up, which is I have more and more friends that are, really successful business people, professionals in the community. And they are talking about how they don't know if their kids are going to go to college. And I think it's a fascinating thing. I've just heard it a lot more in the last 2 years. And, a lot of that is depending on what their kids want to do. Everyone's different, right? Look, if your kid's going to be a CPA or an engineer, a doctor, a dentist, you're going to college. If they're having other plans, other goals, entrepreneurship, a business, et cetera, then the picture is getting a little bit fuzzier. And so I'm wondering if that's something you're hearing more when I hear you say that we're preparing these kids, not only with a degree, but with options when they come out. Is that a trend that you two see picking up more? I mean, maybe people bypassing the university and just getting right into the workforce? I'm just curious.
I think there's honor and dignity in all of those options. And I say that, we have an incredible 4-year land grant institution in our backyard, Colorado State University, right? And so we're never going to take the 4-year diploma option off the table.
Sure.
But I think it's important for us to realize that if you study community college statistics, almost 2/3 of community college students actually have already 4-year degrees. So they're trying to figure out how to go back to school to reskill, upskill, and reimagine their own career journey as a result of maybe not getting it right the first time or realizing that they want to do something different. And so I think it's just normalizing students and young people and adults have the ability to change their minds. We want them to get really clear around what their personal interests and passions are. We want to make sure that the military is an option with dignity. We just started our first JROTC program 2 years ago in partnership with the Army, and it's been fantastic how many students are getting plugged into that. We have great community colleges here, so really ensuring students have 2-year program options at the table and are walking away with college credits on their transcript for free before they have an opportunity to graduate is not only financially great for a family, but it also ensures that students are prepared, that they know what the rigor looks like at the college level before they ever leave here. So I do think you're going to see more of that. I think we're ahead of the curve in a lot of different ways around honoring and dignifying those particular things and building specific pathways. We also want to make sure that we're inviting all of our business community into this conversation too, because the dynamics of the workforce are continuing to change annually, right? And we want to continue to keep up with what the future is. Like, what was it? Wayne Gretzky, I think it was Steve Jobs said about Wayne Gretzky that what made him great is he never skated to the puck. He skated to where the puck was going. And so really thinking about where our kids' lives are going to be 10, 15 years from now and designing programs in partnership with the business community today to be able to meet those challenges is a priority of our system. And I think it's one of the reasons why we're experiencing success. I think it's also one of the reasons why our students really enjoy being a part of our school district.
To answer your question, I do see there was a daily podcast about this a couple of months back about how just traditional state institutions of learning now, I mean, we're looking at CSU and the CU footprint, those are becoming prohibitively expensive. I mean, they're no longer a state school is a lesser tuition amount. I mean, my financial advisor told us when Bo turns 18, it's projected that state school tuition for a 4-year college is going to be $250,000. So we have to be saving towards $250,000 to get him into a state school for tuition. And I just thought, wow. So I think part of this, and I echo everything Brian said, but I also think it's incumbent upon us, if we're going to look where the puck is going, to use that analogy, we also have to equip our students with financial literacy so that they can make informed decisions and not thrust an 18-year-old into crippling debt that will make their life decisions for them for the next decade, right? I think that is a moral code that we owe our students. And so when we were talking about changing our graduation requirements last year, this came up, and we wanted to give students more opportunity to explore things that they wanted for their graduation requirements, and that went through an incredibly brilliant iterative process with feedback loops so that we got it tailored, but consistent in all that. And all the interest groups was this commitment to offering financial literacy as a core requirement of our students. And so I think that's one push. And I think Director Schoenbauer, some of the other board members are very adamant about as well, because it's not just enough to just release them into the ether and say, good luck. You have to have kids understand what world they're going into. And the financial components of that, the consequences, and maybe, having a pause before you make that huge commitment and do something else, and get a traditional job for 2 years, save up for college if that's something you still want to do. But I think we have to do both, though. I think we have to allow our kids to be ready for that option immediately at 18, immediately when they graduate, and also give them the tools so they can make an informed decision for themselves. I think we're doing both. I believe we're doing both.
I like to help them gain clarity and help them make an informed decision. I've read that, when you talk to middle-aged people and older, one thing they wish they would have learned in school that they didn't is financial literacy. That's at the top. And I would echo that. I know my, education, K through 12, financial literacy wasn't there. There was a lot, there was probably a lot of good things, but financial literacy wasn't there. Is there anything that jumps out at you in the Poudre School District that is helping get kids, kind of that financial literacy, teaching them some of this, which I don't know what that would be. Is that a class on mutual funds? Is it a class on investing? Is it a class on compounding interest, or all three? How does that look? Is there anything there right now? And is there anything that might be there in the future?
Yeah, it's actually a mandated class that every one of our high school students has to take in order to graduate. So we're really proud of that. It can, and we have to think above and beyond that too. What's really great is, and different about Fort Collins, is I think there's a credit union on every corner. And so they've been really engaged in our school system and partnering with us in new and unique ways. And they're actually developing extracurricular opportunities for like clubs and activities for students to explore and deepen their knowledge around financial literacy too. So it's just another opportunity for businesses to partner with our teachers and our school districts to make sure that we're accelerating that type of work. But I'm really proud that our Board of Education, and through the different feedback loops as we were thinking about, and did change our graduation requirements a year ago for students who are coming into our high school starting next year. But we held on to that requirement around financial literacy, knowing it means so much to not just our students today, but that's going to pay dividends 20, 30, 40, well, the rest of their lives, really.
That's huge. We do have an unusually high number of credit unions in Fort Collins also.
I didn't notice that until you just said that.
Fun fact, we do have quite a few. I don't want to gloss over too, Brian, you mentioned just the military program, the community college program. Let's dive into that a little bit too, because I think that's something people would like to hear more about.
Yeah. So concurrent enrollment. So students in PSD are able to take high school credits and college credits at the same time. And so we don't structure that. We want students to, well, we do structure it, but it's in a couple of different ways. Like one, we want it to be exploratory. If students are taking their first college class, we want it to be something that's tied to something that they're interested in and passionate about. But it's not something that if you take that first course, you're now required to like pursue this 2-year program. So there's some flexible options there. Students do have the opportunity to participate in specific course pathways that actually can lead to an associate's degree at the same time that they're actually graduating our high school with. So I'm really proud with our local higher ed partners, not just CSU, but Front Range Community College is a really, really big partner. And a lot of our teachers are licensed college professors. So these courses, you don't necessarily need to go to sit in a Front Range classroom classroom, you can actually benefit from that level of rigor from actually learning from one of our PSD teachers who also has pursued, master's degrees, doctorate type degrees, where they have an opportunity to participate that in our campus. Our JROTC program lives and breathes at our Career Technical Center at Poudre High School. We provide every single one of our high school students transportation and access to the Career Technical Center, whether it's for the JROTC program or if you want to pursue advanced manufacturing or these different pathways that we have, behavioral health pathways. I'm not going to do it justice. I wish I had the menu in front of me. But every single one of our high schools, if you want to participate in these more advanced pathways, we will get you on a bus. You go to your home high school, and then we'll transport you to Poudre High School for half the day. And you have an opportunity to really focus. And many of those students, if not all of them, are graduating high schools with industrial certifications that will benefit them in the event they want to go directly into the workforce. And they benefit them even if they want to go into a 2 or 4 year program, right? They're really getting a jump start to their peers. And we spend a lot of time measuring the impact. I think one of the greatest data points that I love to celebrate that talks about the diploma integrity that we have in PSD is students who do go to a 2-year or a 4-year program. We measure and keep track of their GPAs in college. And our students who graduate have the highest GPAs in their freshman year across the Front Range compared to any other districts, which means they're prepared, right? They're not... Yeah. They're not having the, my freshman year in college many, many moons ago was a rough go because I simply was not prepared, not only for the academic level of rigor. I don't think I was prepared socially and emotionally to put myself in a classroom with hundreds of other students who I think had a deeper head start. And so I'm really grateful that that's not the reality in PSD. Our students are leaving here and they're able to prosper and flourish as a result of their family's trust, their partnership, and the incredible teachers and staff that we have working every single day tirelessly. It's a mission, but it's a proven experiment that we have room to grow, and we're continuing to figure out how to be focused on that, where there are areas for and opportunities for us to think differently about how we do business. But I think there's a lot to be proud of in this community around what our school district is doing to benefit families and future generations of families, and they're really proud of it. I think another part of the story, and we were talking earlier about going to a brewery or a coffee shop and talking about our schools, you have a lot of families here that graduated from PSD schools. They're Lobos for life or Impalas for life. And think about what's happening now in Wellington, where, we just opened Wellington Middle School, High School, just 3 years ago. And their football team just played in the state championship. And the entire town of Wellington just came out and sent them off down to Pueblo with a full parade and had a parade welcoming them when they returned, right? And that's happening in Timnath now, too, where we just celebrated last Tuesday their track and cross country students who were state champions this year. So there's a lot of opportunities for our towns to partner. And it's not just academically, but it's socially and emotionally. It's athletically, music and the arts. And I'm going to the Lincoln Center tonight. Rocky Mountain High School has their holiday concert. And it's an incredible, I remember last year, I don't think there was a dry eye in the place, just in terms of the beautiful songs that they were singing. So there's just so much to offer and so much to be proud of in our district and in our community.
2 points that I think it's also in the numbers. So you asked about, the availability of these programs and how popular they are. I'll give you an anecdote. We were talking about reviewing our calendar. Okay. A lot of this came up because we didn't have 4A yet. We didn't know how, if there was ever going to be air conditioning, right? So we were getting
4A for those listening is the ballot measure.
That we just passed, the $49 million. Thank you again. But because we had to wrestle with a very difficult problem, which was it's so hot at the start of school that, talk about data, our test scorers and our teachers were telling us that attendance was dipping, that student performance was dipping because it was too hot. And so we wanted to start a little bit later. And so I just thought, let's just push that button and do it. Come to find out that our calendar is also, it's coordinated with Front Range. It's coordinated with these community colleges calendars. And I said, okay, well, how many people are we talking? How many kids actually take advantage of that? And it's like 4,000 students.
Yeah, more than a few.
4,000 students get credit from these programs. And I think if we're going to be, if we have fidelity to our commitment of graduating with options, then we've got to keep doing that, So I think that's proof in the pudding. And the other anecdote I'll share too, which is I get excited listening to Brian because of all the things that we're doing, and he's at the helm of this. So it's really, I love being in the room with him. But when we were down at CASB a couple weeks ago, that's the Colorado Association of School Boards. So a lot of if not all the districts in Colorado will come together for an annual retreat. And then we go to breakout sessions and we listen to best practices. And it's a time to network and sort of think through different issues that you may be having and network with other board directors. My first year was last year. And, I'm spinning like a top. I just got elected. I don't know which end is up. This year I went in with a lot more purpose-minded and going to different sessions, et cetera. But one thing that was interesting to me is when you tell someone who you are and where you work, and you say, "Oh, I'm a director in Poudre School District," the eyebrows go up, and it comes with it a little bit of a swagger because people know who we are, they know what we're doing, and I wouldn't say it's the envy of the nation, but we are definitely a different school district. And we're the top 5 largest, I think, in 8th largest in Colorado, but our reputation sort of precedes us. And so we have a commitment to excellence, all the things Brian is talking about. And so if I'm someone like, we talked about this before we started, that I was coming up from Denver largely to escape the Denver school district that my kid was going to go in. I knew he had some special needs and I knew that he needed something different. So 90% of our decision-making to come up here was because of the reputation of PSD schools. And so far, our faith has been rewarded day in and day out. I took Bo, our 6-year-old first grader, to a CSU game, the women's game last Sunday. Not only does he read the scoreboard, he can read the scoreboard, knows the score, knows the time, knows what's team. He also has a different situational awareness that I never had at 6. Right. So he had a better time of the game because he understood that we were in overtime. And by the way, my Kentucky Wildcats also took Gonzaga to overtime the night before and beat them in overtime. So tough weekend for Gonzaga. But I think that's sort of proof in the pudding of what we're doing here is it's the marrying of both literacy, graduating options, and that kid feeling like he belongs in his community. I mean, it's as a father, I know you know this. It's a wonderful thing to see your kid getting all these blessings, all these benefits that I didn't have, and to see it be just so normalized, and I just don't want our community ever take for granted how special and wonderful this school district is. And of course, we have to improve, and there's things we need to improve upon, but man, our foundation is solid. It's so solid.
Yeah, I think it's probably good to give even more props to the teachers in the schools, because that just made me think of, my daughter, Ada, 6 years old. And she was talking to me recently about a boy who wasn't being nice in class. It happens. And she went and talked to the teacher about it. And what the teacher told them is, and this is the experience I've had again and again when I ask Ada, what did the teacher tell you? How did it go? And I hear the response and I think, well, that is so much better than I would have handled the situation. Like every time I'm just thinking, these are real pros. Like, I mean, every time it is, I think I have an idea, how I would have maybe reacted, how I would guide her. But instead of saying, I just said, well, what'd your teacher say? And then she tells me, and it's so brilliant and it's so supportive and it's so the right thing to tell this little person at this stage of their lives. And I'm incredibly impressed. And I've heard these stories from other parents who have kids older than me, that person that has the 9-year-old, the 13-year-old. And it really is just, it never ceases to amaze me. Yeah. Every single time.
Our teachers' wisdom, knowledge, and their patience is what I think makes them really special. Mm-hmm. The board recently, last Tuesday night, recognized Zach Elementary School. It's one of 7 national blue ribbon schools in the state of Colorado. It's the second time that they've been recognized with this incredible award, which means it's not just a super high performing school, but it's a super inclusive school where they're really working together with parents. There's a high level of community engagement. And there were about 5 to 7 students that came to speak as young as 5 years old and probably as old as 11. And I don't think there was one of them that didn't really give credit to their teachers of what made that school such a special place. So, I mean, listen to children. They tell you the truth and they're sincere and they're authentic. But I think, we have a lot of Zach Elementary Schools. So we have about 30 of them. They may be called something different, but I really believe the story is the same, that students really recognize and understand the significance of the teachers in their life. And I will tell you, I would have never gotten into education if it wasn't for the teachers in my life who helped me through difficult things, invested in me, helped see me for who I was and what I wanted to be. And I wanted to pay that back and give them credit for the things that they've done and really pay that forward with other students. So the impact that they're having on young people's lives is well beyond a diploma. It's helping them find purpose and find their identities and realize how to accept themselves for who they are and what they want to be and be curious about those things. And I just think there's nothing more special than that in a community. And we owe our teachers and the people that support our teachers, our paraprofessionals and bus drivers, and we owe them such a huge debt of gratitude. And I'm really grateful that not only does 4A help with their compensation, but it certainly also helps them have better working conditions to thrive in this community moving forward well into the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I mean, yeah, Poudre School District. I mean, I think you're helping kids find their unique ability, what lights them up. You're leveling up their emotional intelligence. And did I hear you right? There are 4,000 kids in the associate's degree program that are
taking college credits.
Out of how many seniors though? I mean, that's the other impressive. I think we had 8,000.
Or
high schoolers, I should say. Excuse me, not seniors.
Yeah, I think there's about, I'm going to do the math wrong in my head. I think there's about 2,500 students per cohort.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you think about, just under 40, between 40 and 50% of every student in our high schools today is already taking a college class.
That's incredible.
That is incredible. Like, that's an amazing number. When I was like, all right, well, Calgary's going to have to stay where it is, I think.
I'd love to see the stat of how that compares. that's mind-blowing to me.
We're an outlier.
Yeah. I mean,
we're an outlier.
It has to be an outlier. And am I correct in thinking that these associate's degrees, I mean, whether it's Colorado State University or another state university, I mean, you can take that and you can get 2 years.
It's transferable.
It's transferable.
So
you're getting 2 years
your
for the
Ames
credits.
Community College,
Which is why that commitment to graduating with options it means a lot, because you're giving them not only the intellectual and creative freedom to do that different level thinking, in high school, but you're rewarding them with credit so that their financial journey, if they so choose to avail themselves of post-secondary education, is going to be that much easier. And so what an incredible, not a gift, but what an incredible commitment from a district saying, this is who we are, and we want you to have options regardless of your financial picture. You're going to be well equipped academically to enter our workforce. You're going to be literate. You're going to feel loved. And I mean, I couldn't think of anything better as far as an incubator for our democracy and for putting some good out into the world each and every day. I know it sounds corny, but it's true.
I think it's important to know too that those courses are free.
Yeah.
Right? We're not charging families. We're figuring out ways between the state, the higher ed institutions in our district to pick up the tab. So for any family that's interested in having their young adult kind of explore, dabble, whether it's you can concentrate and get the associate's degree if you want, but for some students that it's not developmentally appropriate. They're just trying to figure out what they want to do, but do it in a way that's preparing them for success when they go to college, but not have to graduate high school and inherit all that debt. And it actually takes the tab that they're about to get, and knocks that down quite significantly.
I mean, cumulatively, how much this has to be saving families, students and families, just an extraordinary amount, especially in this environment we're in of rising tuition costs. We talked about how expensive college is. I mean, it's an enormous amount of money.
I'm going to put Dwayne on top of that.
Yeah,
that's a Dwayne question.
It would be really fascinating to see that, because the number has to be absolutely astounding.
Yeah.
As you start to kind of land the plane here, I think I want to just point out the website again. What's the website that people can go to?
psdschools.org.
Okay. psdschools.org. I like what you said too about just walking into the school and say, hey,
that is the best way to do it.
Can I chat with the principal?
One of the best parts of my job too is the directors are required. It's a requirement that we go do school visits, and it's honestly the best part of my job. I get to go have an audience with a principal who's excited to share the things that are going on in that. And then a lot of times they're led by students. So I get to have that. And I know Brian does a lot of school visits as part of his job, but I wish I could do it full time.
Yeah, it's fun.
Sorry, I had to jump out, because it's getting in these schools in anywhere in our community and seeing the excitement and the buzz and the energy and the pride. There's nothing like it. So if you're a parent thinking about it, take a tour. Schedule an appointment with the principal. They'll be happy to walk you through the pros and cons and what's right for your student. And that's the best way to make a decision too.
Yeah. No, I love this. And, people are listening and they're thinking, hey, I like these guys. And I bet people are listening and thinking that. Like they're they're probably feeling grateful that you are in the roles that you're in, and they want to support you. How can they support you? How can they support you? How can they support what you're doing? I mean, do you have to run for re-election, Kevin? Can I put another sign in my front yard? What else can we do?
Absolutely. So in 3 years' time, and I've said publicly, I have not made any commitments to running. a second term. We're going to see how this one goes. I've still got 3 years left. Because the truth is, as a board director, it's a huge commitment. It is. I was telling Brian about this in a recent one-on-one conversation we had, is that I mentioned earlier, but there are 3 buckets of sort of stress and reward in my life. One, obviously being a parent is the most important job I'll ever have. We've talked about this too offline. The second is being an attorney and being a small business owner in this town, being a member at a law firm that goes back over 50 years and its commitment to legacy in our town and doing the excellent legal work. And then third is school board, and not always in that order. And so it does feel like a full-time third unpaid job. And so, to answer your question, what you can do to support us, don't support me, support our district. Send your kids to our district. Get involved in your kids' schools. Come to board meetings. Email your board directors. Tell us what's going on that you like. Tell us what's going on that needs to be, that we need to be challenged. We need to do better. So as far as helping us, and if you're a business partner, think about how you can get involved. Maybe you can help sponsor some small measure in your local neighborhood school, knowing that you are literally investing in your potential workforce someday, right? And so I think that those sort of options in our community to get involved in the district and be a part of this community and not just a separate part of our community, I think is really important. So you can support me by supporting our schools directly and give us your kids.
Yeah, I love that. I think to add to that, if you're listening and you're thinking about just a myriad of different ways you might want to partner or learn about our school district, come to one of our events and just celebrate our students, whether it's an athletic event on a Friday night, one of our various award-winning theater productions or choir performances. Like, seeing our students share their brilliance with the community, everybody benefits from that, right? So I think that's an opportunity. If people are, you're a business owner and you're wanting to think about how to get more plugged into one of our various pathways, we actually have a paid for position in the Fort Collins Chamber of Commerce that plays a matchmaker type role for a student that is interested in an internship or externship. So if you're a business that's wanting to provide opportunities for our students to help your workforce and your work product move forward, but also give our students really important job embedded experiences, we have a place for you. We have an incredible PSD foundation from a philanthropic standpoint that is really trying to figure out how to fund teachers' creative ideas, as well as provide scholarship opportunities for many of our first generation students and other students. So that's a philanthropic opportunity for our families. But I think the last thing I would say is just, be honest with us about where we can grow as a school system, but also help celebrate the things that are going really well, whether you're in a coffee shop, in your home, talking around the kitchen table, or at one of our award-winning breweries. Like, just continuing to celebrate and be honest about the great things that are happening here, while also holding us accountable to continuing to get better, I think is the best way that everybody can continue to prosper in this community and as a school district.
I likely will run again. I want to clear that up too. I hadn't made up my mind simply because of I want to do this job really, really well. And part of this was never, I've said this to Brian, I've said this publicly, it was never an ambition of mine, running for school board. I'm not saying I got talked into it, but it's an interesting confluence of events that I truly believe that with my skill set and my perspective and my legal knowledge, that I could actually serve my community. And already this district had given my family so incredibly much. I mean, they gave us a haven in our own life storm. And I think I've talked to you about this, and that this school was also taking care of my kid as much as I would expect of anyone, and then some. So I feel a level of duty almost to give back in whatever way I can. And so if destiny demands of me the service for another 4 years, then so be it. But the reason I think it's helpful is that when I'm making decisions on the dais, or I'm thinking through votes or thinking through information, it's clarifying for me to think about how this benefits our students first and foremost and end. And this is really corny, and I've told a few people this, but every single time I vote on a board meeting, behind the wall, which is on the other side of the wall, the superintendent's office, we have a student gallery of all this incredible student art throughout the district that gets displayed. And so before I make every single vote, I will glance up at the word student, and that is my North Star. So every single vote that I do, I have to believe that it's in furtherance of our students. And sometimes that's yes, sometimes that's no. But for me, it's clarifying that that's it. That's the only thing I'm considering. I'm not worried about how I'm going to be perceived. I don't care if it's popular or not. I may get it from Allison when I get home if she thinks I screwed up, but I try to do the right thing. And I know Brian does too. And I know his staff do too. We are student centric in everything that we do. And so again, to kind of round us out and land the plane, trust us with your kids. take your kids, take a chance on PSD, choose any one of our incredible schools, support our teachers and their principals, especially towards the holiday season too. Be mindful of the kids in class who may not have Christmas presents and Hanukkah presents to go home to, and maybe, work with your teachers. And if you have the means, I always try to give them a little bit more generosity of gift cards that they can distribute to their students, things like that. Those are little things. I do that around book fair too.
Can I add one thing too? Because I think we started this talking about thanking our voters. I think continuing to stay engaged in the democratic process is really, really important. We are so grateful to the voters of our local community who helped celebrate, not celebrate, but we want to celebrate the transformational act that just took place. But the work still continues. If we're really paying attention to what's happening down in Denver right now as the legislature kind of goes back into session in January, there are some proposed cuts to K-12 education that I'm very concerned about that just recently were announced by our governor. So, across the state, that would equate to about a $200 million reduction to K-12 funding. So we need to really stay abreast of what is happening down there and make sure that as they balance their budget, they're not doing it on the backs of our kids. We recognize that we all have to think creatively as governance teams, both at the state, national, and local level. But our kids deserve the very, very best, and it's continuing to be more challenging to provide them the very best when we're continuing to be in a space of resource constrained. And so really, really getting plugged in with what's happening down in the legislature. Talk to your local elected officials, not just your school board members, but state house reps and state senators, and really making sure that they're informed around the different things that are being discussed down there, I think is more important now than ever before.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's important to point this out because, the work's not done because 4A passed.
That's right. That's right.
I think people tend to think that it is. Forget about it for a while, but stay engaged, stay in communication. I think doing all the things you just mentioned and having these conversations. And I want to thank you both for your service. I'm grateful that you're in your positions. I really mean that. And it is grateful to know you both also and appreciate you taking the time. There's a lot of things you could be doing. I know you're both very busy. So the fact that you're taking the time to sit down with me, talk about this, inform people, educate people. And I think people learn a lot listening to this. So, this is one way people can stay engaged, but I think you've given people a lot of different areas, a lot of different suggestions on ways they can stay in communication and stay informed. So
but I also I'll turn that back and say thank you, Greg. Thank you for doing this, because not only you were so masterful, and this is my plug for you too. If anyone that's thinking about it, I got your name from a work colleague, and I don't know what you would say behind closed doors, but I thought we worked beautifully together. And I told Allison when we finally did buy our house, I was a little bit sad because it meant that the trips with Greg to go see a house were going to be far and few, but we stayed in connection, we stayed in contact. And I think what you are also doing, you are investing in our community in your own way. And you're plugging people in and highlighting. I've listened to all the episodes too. All the incredible guests you've had on the show, I think it's a testament to you too, that you probably didn't have to ask that hard. I think people were just wanting to come down. So I want to say thank you for giving us the platform to come and plug PSD and talk all things. I hope you'll have us back. There's so many different topics we could talk about too that would be really helpful too. And just the last one about school finance formula, that could be a 4-part podcast too. We'd have to think about making it sexy, because it ain't that. But I just want to say thank you for having us and for giving us this opportunity. I'll go and talk to anyone about PSD at any point, because I'm a believer, I'm a convert, and I'm a believer in our schools. And so I just want to say thank you for having us on.
Well, of course, man. I appreciate you saying that. And, it's funny. There's one last thing I'll mention, just kind of a connection and maybe a reason this conversation is so special to me too, is that, when we were growing up, we moved, I think it was 9 times before I made it to high school. So, my parents had amazing jobs, amazing professionals. It was an incredible childhood. We were moving a lot. So it's not lost on me specifically the importance of having kids feel welcomed, having a place where they can go and learn and be excited and make friends. And so what you two are doing, it means the world. And it's a special meaning to me. So thanks again.
One more thought. Yeah. Sorry. This is going to be sappy, but I had a dream come true about 1.5 years ago. So when Bo started at Olander, I was really dedicated. I really wanted to be riding his bike before school started. And so I think it was his second day of school. I took my bike and he took his bike, and we biked through the neighborhood, through Spring Canyon Park on the bike trail with all the other kids going to school with their parents on our bikes to his neighborhood school. And I almost had tears coming down because just watching my little human on his wheels for the first time with a passion that is something that's very huge to me. So you also helped make that happen too. And so there's a lot of this that's just, there's these fleeting moments of just really wonderful things that not just PSD, but I got to have that. And my to your point, my kid does have a community in his school. He has friends. There's a sense of belonging. He knows how to get to and from school by himself, in the park. And that's an incredible luxury that we have in this community. And it's not just Olander. There's so many that fit that particular bill. So thank you again for making that dream come true.
No, of course, man.
I don't know if I told you that before, but it was awesome.
I don't think you did. I
was trying to video it, but also not trying to wreck, and I was also it was the coolest thing ever.
Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. I know this conversation is going to continue. It doesn't end here. The work continues, the collaboration continues. Everybody, thanks for listening, and until next time, cheers.